So al-mubtada means the subject of a sentence. If I say Zaydun rajulun, Zayd is a man, in this sentence we have given information regarding someone. So now logically in that sentence we have to have a subject and we have to have information. So we have to have subject, the thing that the information is regarding, and then you also have to have the information and the information you're giving about this subject. Any informative sentence will have both of these. You'll have a subject that you're talking about and information that you're using to talk about the subject. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Muhammadin khatamin nabiyyin. وعلى آله الطاهرين وصحابته أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. So we're in the explanation of Zahratun Nahu, our introduction to Arabic grammar, and we just finished all the chapters or all the introduction chapters to the rulings of individual words. So we just finished the chapter of Mudhakkar and Mu'annath, and now we're going to go into the chapter of Al-Marfu'at. And now the Al-Marfu'at, the Mansubat and the Majrurat, they're known as Mukammilatul Jumlatain, basically. And what that means is that basically these things that we're going to learn in Al-Marfu'at, the chapters of Al-Marfu'at, Al-Mansubat and Al-Majrurat, the things that we learn in there are those things that are used to complete sentences. And one thing to note before we go into the chapters of Al-Marfu'at and Al-Mansubat and Al-Majrurat is that in Arabic there are 4 states that a word that can take a state will be in. So a word that can take, differences in states, they can be in either one of 4 different states that exist. So the first state that exists is the state of rafa', and the second state that exists is the state of nasb, and the third state that exists is the state of jar, and the fourth state that exists is the state of jazm. And two of those states can happen in nouns and verbs, and 2 of those states are specific to each one. So for example, jazm and the asl, and for each of the 4 states they all have a main sign for you to recognize that state. I need to mention that before I talk about which one is specific to what. So for the state of rafa', the main asl and the main sign for rafa' is a dhamma. So if you see a word that has a dhamma on the last letter, then you know that word is in the rafa' case most likely. And you have substitute signs that also make a word or show you that a word is in rafa', but the main reason that a word would be in rafa' is because because it has a dhamma on it. That's the biggest sign. And then the biggest sign and the main sign for an-nasb, the state of nasb, is a fatha, and the main sign for al-jar is a kasra, and the only sign of jazm is a sukun. So now we have these 4 different states, but for example, if we look at an ism, you'll only see it have 3, and you'll never see it have you'll never see it be in the jazm state. And for example, if you look at a fi'il, so like a present future tense verb, and if you analyze it and its different states, you realize that it never has, and it's never in the jar case. It's always in the jazm. It's always in jazm, it's always in the nasab case, and it's always in the rafa' case. So there's a concept where there are 4 different cases, but for example an ism will only have 3 of them, and a fi'il will only have 3 of them as well. And the state of jazm will only be for the verb, and the state of jar will only be for isms. We can go a bit more deeper into that later. I just wanted to intro that there are different states in Arabic, and there is one main sign for each different state. And that doesn't mean it's the only sign, because that's the biggest mistake. that one can make when studying grammar, to think that dhamma, fatha and kasra are the only signs for you to, like look for if you're looking for the state of a word. And I'll give you a quick example. When you say rajulun, the dhamma is there, the dhammatain, rajulun. So now you know it's an rafa' case. But if you say rajulani, there's a kasra on there, but it's not in jar case. So you have to look at, what word you're looking at, and then find the appropriate sign for cases in that word. So for example, rajulani is considered to be a tathniya word. So now the signs that you're looking for in that word to determine the case of that word is going to change now, depending on what type of word you're looking at. So rajulani is tathniya. So now you're gonna have to be looking for different signs, because the signs of dual words work differently. So now you have to either be looking for an alif or a ya. And if it's an alif, it's an rafa' case. And if there's a ya, rajulayni, then it's either going to be nasb case or it's going to be jar case, depending on what's governing it. So that's one big thing to mention, is that fatha, dhamma, kasra, they might be the asl, and they might be the original, and everything other than the fatha, dhamma, kasra, according to Sibawayh, is just a na'ib to it. It's just a substitute for a fatha, dhamma, kasra, that you have a muqaddar fatha, dhamma, kasra. So some grammarians, they say that it will always be fatha, dhamma, kasra, but in those situations that you don't see the fatha, dhamma, kasra, there's an assumed fatha, dhamma, kasra. I don't want to go too deep into that. Okay, so al-marfu'at. Now, al-marfu'at, I just mentioned to you that there's a case that exists in Arabic grammar, and it's called the rafa' case. So now, the chapter of al-marfu'at is that chapter that tells you all those words that will be in the rafa' case in a sentence. So the first word that will be in the rafa' case, we're going to go over two now. So the first word that will be in the rafa' case is al-fa'il. And to be honest, I think everyone who's studied grammar and who hasn't studied grammar, who they may have heard of this concept, and it's called al-fa'il, and it basically means the doer. So anytime a verb comes into a sentence, or anything similar to a verb comes into a sentence, and it requires the need, and it has the need to have a doer of that meaning, then that word and that doer of that meaning will be in the rafa' case. Okay, so the easiest example to give is that if a verb comes into a sentence and the meaning requires someone to be doing that verb, then that person who's doing that verb will be given the rafa' case. I'm mentioning 8 reasons why a word would be in the rafa' case. So the first one is al-fa'il, when this word is the doer of a verb. So for example, I want to say daraba, hit, like he hit, but I want to say Zayd hit, so I want to make Zayd the doer of the hit. So then I can say daraba Zaydun, and we put dhammatain on Zaydun. Why did we put dhammatain on Zayd? Is because the asl and the original sign of the rafa' case is a dhamma. So wherever we can put a dhamma, we put a dhamma. And on Zayd, we can. Zayd is a type of word that accepts dhamma, fatha, kasra. And later on, we're going to learn those words that don't. Okay, so the doer of a word will be considered to be in the rafa' case. And since this is like a very simple explanation, and it's a introduction to the marfu'at, I would save time and not mention any unnecessary and extra information. So al-fa'il is simply just the doer of a verb or an action. So now, if I want to say nasara, like I want to say the word help, and I want to say that Amr, he helped me. So I would say nasarani Amrun. Amr helped me, or gave me victory. Like Amr gave me victory. Nasarani Amrun. Amr has a dhamma. Why? Because he's doing the action. So that's what al-fa'il is. And now the second word, and the second word that will be in the rafa' case. So the second thing that we're going to talk about in the chapter of al-marfu'at, those words that will be in the rafa' case, mainly having a dhamma on them, basically. The second word that will be in the rafa' case is na'ibul fa'il. So it will be that word that is a substitute doer. Now it's very like hard to explain the concept and how this one works. The substitute doer. So basically in Arabic there are two types of verbs. And the first type of verb is very common, and it's the it's the most common one, and it's called al-fi'lul ma'ruf. And it's basically called the verb that the doer is known, that the doer is mentioned after this verb. So when I say nasarani zaydun or nasara zaydun amran, Zayd gave victory to Amr. So now we can see that the doer is mentioned after the verb. That's al-fi'lul ma'ruf. That it's such a verb that you also mention the doer with it. And you might think to yourselves, like, how can we have a verb that doesn't have the doer mentioned after it? And you can. And that's basically the second type of verb, and it's al-fi'lul majhul. And it's basically that verb that the doer is not mentioned and it's left vague. So for example, or you also say ma lam yusamma fa'iluhu, that verb which its doer is not mentioned. And an example of that, I just mentioned nasara zaydun amran, that Zayd, he gave victory to Amr. Now if you say nusira amrun, that means Amr was given victory too, but we don't know who gave him victory. And you can see Amrun now from the previous sentence, you can see Nasara Zaydun Amran. It has a fatha, and normally the action or the person that the action is done on, that person will have, or that thing will have a fatha, and it's going to be in the nasab case. But now in the second sentence, you say Nusira Amrun, Amr was helped. So it has a rafa and it has a dhamma on it. So we call this a substitute doer. And it's basically when you delete the original doer of the verb and you replace it with the done upon, and you just coat it and give it the rafa case, and that's how we leave it. But it also has to change the verb as well. So you have to change the verb from al-fi'lul ma'ruf to al-fi'lul majhul, and then you can make the done upon become the doer of that word. Because that verb, like now when you put it into the majhul version of it, it now means was helped. So now the doer of that word, the doer of that verb means that person was helped. So even though it's technically the doer of this al-fi'lul majhul, it's technically the doer of this this new verb that's called al-fi'lul majhul. It still carries the meaning of maf'ul. That's why you don't call it al-fa'il, you call it na'ibul fa'il, because it just replaced the original doer. When you say nasara zaydun amran, you say Zayd gave victory to Amr. But then if you say nusira amrun, you say Amr was given victory to, because you deleted Zayd from there. And because a verb always needs a fa'il, a verb always needs a doer, and because you deleted the doer, now you have to make the done upon take the place of the doer to fulfill and give that full meaning that al-fi'lul majhul is bringing. And at the beginning it is kind of hard to wrap your head around, but just know that is what na'ibul fa'il is. I think that's the best I could pretty much explain it. That is basically when you replace the fa'il using the word that's done upon. So that is the meaning of na'ibul fa'il. And then the next two we can explain it together. And number 3, and we're still talking about those words that will be in the rafa' case. So the third word that will be in the rafa' case in a sentence is al-mubtada. And the fourth word that will be in the rafa' case is al-khabr. And we're going to explain it together because they come together. So al-mubtada means the subject of a sentence. And al-khabr means the information you give regarding the subject of the sentence. So for example, if I say that Zaydun rajulun, Zayd is a man. Now if I say Zaydun rajulun, Zayd is a man, in this sentence we have given information regarding someone. So now logically in that sentence we have to have a subject and we have to have information. So we have to have subject, the thing that the information is regarding. And then you also have to have the information and the information you're giving about this subject. But any informative sentence will have both of these. You'll have a subject that you're talking about and information that you're using to talk about the subject. So now you call those two things mubtada in Arabic grammar. You call that mubtada, and you call the information the khabar. So mubtada means the subject of the sentence. And again, I'll give more examples because the best way to explain these type of concepts is through examples. So, for example, if you say al-baytu jamilun, you say the house is beautiful. You're giving information about the house. So you say the house is beautiful. So if you say al-baytu jamilun, al-bayt is the subject and jamil is the information. So it's whenever you give information. So the thing that you're giving information regarding, that will be considered to be the mubtada. And the information you're using to give information about the subject is the information, is the khabar basically. So khabar means in an info or predicate, and mubtada means the subject. So as I mentioned in the beginning, when we were talking about al-marfu'at, is that there are 8 that we're going to go over. 8 words in certain sentences. 8 words that will have or will be in the rafa' case. So we just mentioned al-fa'il, the doer of a verb. Na'ibul fa'il, the substitute doer, which is the doer of al-fi'lul majhul. So you have 2 types of verbs, right? I mentioned that you can say you either can say he helped or he was helped. So it depends on which one of those verbs you're going to use. And when you study grammar after the introduction, then that's what you're going to go into. These types of verbs, they exist. It's not just one type of verb. He helped, he helped, he helped. You can also have another type of verb which means he was helped, which makes him the doer, but at the same time the done upon. And the third and the fourth concept that we went through was al-mubtada and al-khabar, the subject and the information regarding the subject. And it's very easy, and it's very easy to just logically understand that. So there's no need to explain to you how would you recognize the information, how would you recognize the subject, because just from looking at the sentence you'll understand what the subject and the information is. And later on in grammar there are a few more concepts and a few more things you have to look at in regards to mubtada and khabar, whether one can be ma'rifah and nakira, which one can be, can they both be ma'rifah? That is something that we're going to look at. But one thing to mention about the states in general, about the rafa' case and about the nasab case, the jar and the jazm case, is that for the students of grammar who have already studied, and I'm not sure why you're watching this video if you have already studied Arabic grammar, But for the ones that have already studied this science, then I won't leave you with just beginner information. That Imam Ibn Malik mentions in his Alfiyah, and he says, والرفع والنصب جعلا إعرابا لاسم وفعل نحو لن أهابا والاسم قد خصص بالجر كما قد خصص الفعل بأن ينجزم. So he mentions in his Alfiyah, he said, وَالرَّفْعَ وَالنَّصْبَ جَعَلًا إِعْرَابًا. You make rafa' and you make the nasab case. You make that the cases. وَالرَّفْعَ وَالنَّصْبَ جَعَلًا إِعْرَابًا لِسْمٍ وَفِعْلٍ. You make the rafa' and the nasab case. You make them both apply to the ism and the fi'l. نَحْوُ لَنْ أَهَابًا. Just like لَنْ أَهَابًا. Because the ba has a fatha on there. Lan ahaba. Because of the lan, it made it have, and it made it be in the nasab case. So now he's telling you in this line, والرفع والنصب جعلا إعرابا. So والرفع والنصب جعلا إجعلا إعرابا لاسم وفعل نحو لن أهابا. So he's saying make the rafa' and the nasab case apply to isms and fi'ls. And then he says, وَالِاسْمُ قَدْ خُصِّصَ بِالْجَرِّ كَمَا. And he's saying the ism is specific to jar. Jar, the jar case will only happen and will only be applied on an ism. وَالِاسْمُ قَدْ خُصِّصَ بِالْجَرِّ كَمَا قَدْ خُصِّصَ الْفِعْلُ بِأَنْ يَنْجَزِمَ. The same exact way that the fi'l will be the only word that has a jazm, and will be the only word in the jazm case. So like how I mentioned in the beginning, when I was explaining all these different cases and their signs, I mentioned that all these different cases, they only apply to certain types of words. So now, and I just mentioned now, والرفع والنصب جعلا إعرابا لاسم وفعل نحو لن أهابا والاسم قد خصص, made specific to, والاسم قد خصص بالجر كما قد خصص الفعل بأن ينجزم. And then he says فارفع بضم, and when you put a word in the rafa' case, make it have a dhamma. فارفع بضم وانصبا فتحا, and when you make a word have nasb, then give it a fatha. وانصبا فتحا وجر, and when you make a word go into the jar case, وانصبا فتحا وجر كسرا, then give it a kasra. So I'm gonna mention that again slowly. فارفع بضم وانصبا فتحا وجر كسرا كذكر الله عبده يسر. Just like the example, كذكر الله, the dhamma on the ra, ذكر الله, the kasra on the ha, عبده يسر. And then he said واجزم بتسكين. And then Ibn Malik mentions, and he says, وَجْزِمْ بِتَسْكِينٍ. And when you put a word in the jazm case, give it a sukoon. Give it a sukoon. وَجْزِمْ بِتَسْكِينٍ وَغَيْرُ مَا ذُكِرٍ. And all those ones that weren't mentioned, meaning he's telling you that not everything will have a dhamma, fatha, kasra, and a sukoon for you to realize that they are in those states. وَغَيْرُ مَا ذُكِرٍ يَنُوبُ جَاءَخُ بَنِي نَمِرٍ. كَجَاءَ أَخُو بَنِي نَمِرٍ. He's saying that everything that won't be, and all the states and all the signs that you use to recognize those states, all those signs that you use from the dhamma, kasra, fatha, and the sukoon, just know that if you can't find them in a word, then it's going to be a substitute for that dhamma, fatha, kasra, and the sukoon. يَنُوبُ. So he was of the opinion that the asl and the main sign for each one is fatha, dhamma, kasra, sukoon, but other things will come to substitute and fill in for the dhamma, fatha, and the kasra and the sukoon. واجزم بتسكين وغير ما ذكر ينوب جاء أخو كجاء أخو بني نمر. جاء أخو بني نمر. أخو, the wow comes here to show the rafa' case. Bani, that ya comes here to show that it's in the jar case. جاء أخو بني نمر. The ja without a hamza is according to a lugha, that you're allowed to say ja'a without a hamza. And also you see it in a lot of poetry. جاء أخو without a همزة. جاء أخو بني نمر وارفع بواو وانصبن بالألف واجرر بياء ما من الأسماء أصف. And I end it at this line. And he mentions that now he's talking about a concept where you have other things that fill in for the fatha, dhamma and kasra. What will they be? So he mentions وارفع بواو. Now when you and he's talking about words, specific words, because he says it at the end of the line, ما من الأسماء أصف. Those words that I'm going to tell you and I'm going to talk about and I'm going to describe them to you, do this to them. وارفع بواو. When you put them in the rafa case, give them a wow. وارفع بواو وانصبن بالألف. And give them in the nasab case. When you want to give those words the nasab case, give them an alif. وارفع بواو وانصبن بالألف وجرر بياء. And when you put them in the jar case, give them a ya. ما من الأسماء أصف. Those words that I'm going to describe to you. And I'll end it here, inshaAllah al-Aziz. Any mistake and shortcoming was from myself and shaitan, and Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam are both free from it. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.